For more on the Winnipeg Jets desperately trying to stay alive in these Stanley Cup playoffs, now on the brink of elimination, let's bring in our hockey insider, Darren Dreger. Dregs, as we looked ahead to the series between the Avs and the Jets, we all said, okay, goaltending advantage, definitely Winnipeg. So let's move on. Could you have, in your wildest imaginations, believed that Connor Hellebuyck and the Jets could be out-goalied in this series?
No, not for a second. I mean, it just does not compute, especially when you take into consideration the regular season, the play of Alexander Georgiev with the Colorado Avalanche. Go back to game one, Gino, that wild 7-6 affair where Connor Hellebuyck, on his availability, the day after just stated all I felt I had to do was make one more save than the other guy late in the game. And that's exactly what he did as the Jets opened the series with victory on home ice. And since then, it has been all straight uphill. But this goes well beyond Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, it's not like Connor Hellebuyck forgot how to stop the puck. He's a former Vezina Trophy winner. He's nominated to win the Vezina again. Many believe that he will. Inexplicably, the Winnipeg Jets have not been able to defend in front of him. The stress that they have put on this future Hall of Fame goaltender has been traumatic. And I think at times that's been an understatement in this series. We've heard the head coach, Rick Bowness, Gino, talk endlessly about the individual mistakes that are being made. A lot of that happens in the defensive zone, which again adds more stress to Connor Hellebuyck. So I'm not letting him off the hook. He needs to have his best game of this series. Otherwise, this series is going to end. Because equally surprising to me is the fact that it's like we all got dummied by the Colorado Avalanche through the regular season. Not only have they found an extra gear in the opening round of this playoffs against the Jets, but they've found gear 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if Alexander Georgiev is going to be part of the success story of the Avalanche, then every team that moves forward into round 2 in the Western Conference, if the Avs are fortunate enough to do it in 5, had better be paying close attention because this team is for real.
Okay, Dregs, big picture now. Before the start of the season, we were wondering, are the Winnipeg Jets going to move into a retool mode? But then they signed Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck long-term deals like, okay, they're locked in. They're rolling. Through most of the year, we all thought, okay, they're locked in. This team could really go deep. If they do get bounced in this first-round series, what can we see in terms of fallout going into the offseason?
Well, I think that there would be some level of expected change. No different than any team that is disappointed, through round 1 of the playoffs. You go through that process where in hockey operations, every aspect of what went into the team and the disappointment is considered and then ultimately digested. Here's what I know, Gino. I spent time early in the season in Winnipeg, had that lengthy sit down with one of the owners of the Winnipeg Jets, Mark Chipman, and it was based around sagging attendance in Winnipeg. And then later in the season, Chris Johnson did a bigger piece for The Athletic, again, in a lengthy sit down with Mark Chipman. And again, revisited the story of what has to change. What can the Jets do to, improve the gate and bring more people back into the building? Well, number one, Mark Chipman wasn't letting anyone off the hook and established in both of those interviews that first and foremost, the team has to put a winning product on the ice. They took an all-in approach to this season. That started, as you've acknowledged, with the extensions to Scheifele and Hellebuyck, the ads that they brought in around the trade deadline. I mean, this team was built to not win a round, but to contend for the Stanley Cup. So there will be bitter disappointment in ownership, which will shift down to management with Kevin Cheveldayoff and that group. So I do start to wonder a little bit about what changes we might see in hockey operations. As we've talked about, Gino, we saw the family health issues that Rick Bowness had to endure. He took a leave of absence to care for his wife, Judy. Then he, late in the season, had his own health concerns. This guy was lured out of retirement. So could we see Rick Bowness go back into retirement on his own terms? That'll be a decision he has to make. Then you look at the roster. If this isn't a winning roster, then how does Kevin Cheveldayoff or management change that? And I think not again, unlike maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs, they look at their core. Their top 4 on defense maybe needs an upgrade, needs another piece there. Well, how do they acquire that piece? Do they dangle a carrot like Nikolai Ehlers, whose name is kind of out there leading up to the NHL trade deadline as potential bait? I think that if the Winnipeg Jets fall to the Colorado Avalanche in 5, 6, or 7 in round 1, that every possibility has to be considered.
But Drex, should there be a consideration of a little bit of patience, given the fact that if they do get ousted, they're being ousted by one of the best teams in the entire NHL, in the Colorado Avalanche? This is no slouch of a first-round matchup for the Winnipeg Jets.
No, and that's a common sense approach. And, that's quality thinking, because I believe that most people outside of Winnipeg, Gino, and around the National Hockey League would look at that Jets team and how it's been constructed, the strengths that they have, and go, no, this is a team that's going to be good, very good, for a long, long time. But if they don't get through the first round, there's only so much respect that you can pay to the Colorado Avalanche, who aren't that far removed from being a Stanley Cup champion. So how do you find that next step, or turn the page to that next chapter of where you truly are a Stanley Cup contender? So look, we're forecasting the potential of change, but that doesn't mean that Mark Chipman or Kevin Cheveldayoff or senior leadership of the Winnipeg Jets are in tune with all of that. Maybe they just push away and say, we need some time to consider just about everything. And in the end, they do very little. But there's always going to be very good teams like Colorado that you're going to have to get by to get to the second round, to get to the conference final, ultimately to get to the Stanley Cup championship final. And if you don't, and you keep embracing that all-in sort of attitude and it doesn't pay off, at what point does ownership say, all right, well, we're not going to be a cap team anymore. We're going to be a budget team, because in a smaller market, that's what the business profile, the business model dictates we have to be. And nobody wants that in Winnipeg.
Bottom line is there could be some price to pay if the Winnipeg Jets cannot win on home ice tonight against the Colorado Avalanche and live to see another day in these Stanley Cup playoffs. Hockey insider Darren Dreger.